What's going on, guys? It's Cameron from Thinkers Musings here, and today we're going to talk about APC and how you can manage your PDU as well as your UPS remotely. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. If you buy an APC UPS, double check the management card that it comes with. Sometimes they don't come with any, and if that's the case, then I recommend at least the UPS Network Management Card 2. And that's going to give you the ability to have a more up-to-date UI. When I got this card, it was flashed with an older firmware, and today we're not going to go into the firmware flashing process, but if you're interested in seeing that, we can talk about it in a future video. But essentially, when you are logging into your UPS, you have this UPS status, and you can see runtime remaining, when it was last transferred to battery, the temperature, the input voltage. I'm running on 240 or so, yeah, somewhere between 240 248 volts AC, and the output voltage is 208 volts at 60 hertz. Current load is 5.2 amps. And the output volt amps is about 21.6%, and the output watts is close to 30%. The batteries are brand new and they're fully charged, and you have the battery voltage, which is a DC voltage. One thing to note about batteries is that you want to make sure you get new batteries when you buy a UPS. So even if they come with, say, used batteries, I recommend that you buy new batteries. Most will actually not ship their old batteries with the UPS unit, simply because they're going to have varied usage and they won't hold the same charge that they used to. But sometimes you can find sellers that will actually ship you new batteries along with your unit. And the seller that I bought this Smart UPS 5000 XL from, they included new batteries, and there were 3 boxes that came. The UPS itself, which is a rack mount unit, and I also got 2 batteries in 2 boxes. And those batteries are big. I mean, they go from like end to end on the UPS, so they're about as long as the UPS. Once you unpack everything, you slide that front panel off and the front bezel, and then you can slide the batteries in, connect them to the front terminals, and that's pretty much it in terms of your installation. Depending on the UPS that you buy, you just need to make sure that you have the proper socket on the wall. If it is 240 volts, then if you've got a 30 amp circuit, you need a 30 amp plug. And same goes for 20 amps and 20 amps plug. If it's a 120 volt UPS, then make sure your socket and circuit match the amperage that your UPS is rated for. Alright, and once you get into the system, in order to get web access, you have to plug into the network management card, and that could be just into your rack switch, and you're good to go. Take note of the IP address. I actually didn't see what the IP address was before I returned to my desk, but you can log into your router's management interface and look for something with the device name that starts with APC. And that should give you a good indicator of your device on your network. Once you find that, then you can log in, and the default username and password is APC. Very strongly recommended to change that for security reasons. And once you are into the management system, you may see that your runtime remaining, especially if they're brand new batteries, is seconds. And don't be alarmed by that. That just means that you need to do some tests. Don't be alarmed by low battery remaining. That just means you have to do some tests. And I recommend running this runtime calibration test or equivalent several times, 3, maybe 4 times. The more times that you run this, the better your calibration will be on the battery, and the better the runtime remaining estimation will be. There are other tests here that you can run. You can test the alarm if you want to. You can do a UPS self-test. Obviously, try this at least once and make sure you can hear it, but do it at times that it's not going to disturb anybody. If you are just running a dry test, if it is something that is a problem, you want to make sure that's loud enough to hear from inside. Another good thing to do is get a smoke detector for wherever you have this installed, so that if there's issues with the electrical and there's smoke or whatever coming off the equipment, then you have that as well. Okay. And we have the ability to connect other sensors. I don't have these sensors currently hooked up. It would be good to get some of these installed in the rack. I have a separate humidity and temperature sensor that I use, but having this all inclusive, all in one, would actually be pretty nice. And then network, that's just your network information. You get your current speed, all of the IPv4 settings. Yeah. If you have IPv6, then it will also show up here too. And if you need to reboot the UPS for some reason, you can come here and go through all of the wizard, turn it off, put it to sleep, bypass it. Bypassing the UPS means that you're actually bypassing the batteries and you're going straight to main power. Just be careful with that. Main power may not be super clean. So yeah, you're going to be, there would be some cases where you might want to just run it without batteries if you suspect you have bad batteries, for instance. All right. You can reset the network management interface, and that does not mess with the UPS operations. This is just the network interface. Sometimes you just need to go and do a reboot of that part of the UPS. In here, you can actually configure power settings. I have mine configured for 208 volts. That's going to be your best bet for most enterprise equipment. And you can go anywhere from 200 to 240, it looks like, but I would just leave it at 208 unless you have a good reason to change it to either any of these. And the upper voltage, lower voltage, if you go on bypass, this means the range that is acceptable. Not entirely sure about that. I would just be careful messing with the default values here. Okay, and then over here you can actually set the power down options, and their APC has this client called PowerChute. We're going to be going into something a little bit more advanced in a future video on how to configure this tool called NUT, or Network UPS tool, and that is going to be what drives shutdown of all the systems in the rack. But that will be in a future video. On this page, you can set the last battery replacement, and you can also set how many external batteries. You can set the total battery capacity. I don't know if this is 100% needed because I don't currently have this set, but if you'd like to, you can set your total amp hours. Maybe it helps with the calculations of time remaining. The self-test schedule configuration page. This is where you can set your schedule for doing a UPS self-test. This is good to do. You could turn it off if you want to, but it's not going to be that intrusive. So I would just leave it at either the 7th day or the 14th day, or even UPS startup would be a good option. And here's where you can configure PowerChute clients if you use the PowerChute software. But like I said, we're going to be covering a more advanced network configuration for the UPS and how to safely shut down all of your systems in the rack. And then here, if you had additional sensors connected, this is where you would be able to configure their settings on Universal I/O. Because I'm not going to go through the submenus for this one. I may invest in these sensors in the near future. Just depends on how much they go for on the used market. Here you can set session management. I do apparently have concurrent logins allowed, so you could log in as the same user in multiple locations. If you don't want that, you can uncheck it, and it would just require that one user is logged in at a time. And then this allows you to ping the server, so you just issue a ping command for the IP address. And just for simplicity today, I'm not going to go into each of those network subpages, just going to show sort of a high-level glance of the enabled features. You can enable or disable IPv6 in the ping response, HTTP, HTTPS. It looks like you can configure your own SSL certificate if that's your thing. FTP is very important for doing updates using either APC's utility or via a manual update. If you go in to do an update and the utility fails, then you can do a manual update, but you need to follow a process and update the files in order. And that's something we can cover at a later time. Due to the age of these systems, I think once you do the updates, you probably won't be doing them again unless they come out with a security patch. The last update was released in 2021 for this card. I'm not sure if we'll receive updates for this ever again. If you have a newer management card, I believe that there is version 3, and it is compatible with the Smart UPS line. You may continue to receive updates on that card. More network services include Telnet, SSH, SCP, Secure Copy, and several other of these services. And then you can run tests on the UPS itself, and if you want, you can blink the network LED on the device itself. Now, if you want to look at the logs, then you would go to Logs Events. And here we can see where we have some events. And you would also want to filter on critical events for a power loss. So actually on April 5th, I had a power loss and it said high voltage. This is because we had a thunderstorm and it fluctuated. The power actually lost power in the entire house momentarily and everything came back on, thankfully. But because of the long runtime of the UPS, I would have been able to shut everything down with plenty of time to spare. These other errors have come from the original installation of the UPS, I had actually not realized that you had to run the battery calibration multiple times before it would register how much time was left. So please make sure you do that when you set up your UPS, especially with new batteries, and you'll make sure that you register the proper usage, the proper time remaining on your batteries. And let's see. So this is the about page. This is the model number, the SKU. The manufacture date was 2006. Pretty old at this point. The volt amps, 5,000 and 3,500 watts. You need to make sure that when you're sizing out your UPS that you don't go too crazy. I mean, they do make these up like 8,000 or even higher volt amps. You just have to make sure you have the proper sizing. A 30 amp circuit should be able to provide close to twice this much power. I'm only, I guess, pulling 15 amps at 240 volts. That seems about right, because 7,200 watts is going to be 30 amps. So, bottom line is, don't get too large of a UPS, but also don't skimp if you're doing the installation of a 240 volt circuit. 20 amps may be too small. 30 amps gives you plenty of room for most operations. If you're running anything high voltage, high current, and wattage, then you may want more than one 30 amp circuit. All depends on what your application requires. That's about all that I can think of for the UPS. Over here on the PDU, we have a little bit more information. It's that same APC user when you log in to your PDU. In this table, we have the current usage, and it's well within the normal load. I had a peak power usage on 4.4 at 1.83 kilowatts. I think that's when I had everything turned on, just doing a usage capacity test with everything in my rack turned on. I was not even hitting 3 kilowatts. So that's pretty good. This guy is rated for, I want to say 3,600 watts. 3,700 watts. And you're within the normal range if you're within 3 kilowatts, 0 to 3 kilowatts. So not even close to hitting the danger near overload. And you can actually track the kilowatt hours that the PDU registers, and then you'll see how much kilovolt amps you get and the power factor. And then here's a little bit more about the model, the serial number, phases, metered phases. And I think these would be different if you had maybe a switched PDU. You can name your device if you want to. You can set the location. The PDU has alarms. This is where you view active alarms that may be going on in the system. If you had more than one PDU, this is where you would use network port sharing. I only have one PDU. I might, in the future, end up getting 2 of these so that I can deliver power to both sides. This is a 20 amp PDU, which falls far underneath the 30 amps that the UPS provides. My UPS has 2 of the 30 amp and 2 of the 20 amp sockets. That doesn't mean go and overload, right? You're not going to get more power than you get. Not going to get more power out than you get put in to it. So just be careful the PDU should be able to warn you before you get close to overloading your socket. It's going to look very similar to the UPS, so we're just going to kind of go through these real quick and point out any differences. This is where you would configure the network port sharing if you had multiple PDUs. And here's more information about the device. You can set the load, alarms, and the warnings. Because the UPS underneath can't go higher than 3,500, we should update that to 35. Yep, and there we go. Now that's within spec of the UPS. One thing I didn't cover on the other unit is the date time mode. You can actually connect to an NTP server if you want to, or you can apply local computer time. As you can see, there's a lot available here. If you want to see the energy usage over time, it's pretty much a steady linear graph. And here's the About page. We have more of the model information, the revision, when it was manufactured. Firmware of the UPS and the firmware of this PDU are fairly similar, and they seem to be cross-flashable, so just be careful about that when you do updates. If you do manage to flash over one versus the other, you just need to FTP in and do a manual flash. Alright guys, that'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you would, please hit like and subscribe and hit that bell icon so you can be notified of the next video. Bye for now.